So it's a fairly simple project. I started off basically with rough lengths and then just working out essentially what height I wanted the legs at. I put them slightly higher than perhaps I would normally because they're not knowing who the bench is going to be used by at the end of the day. They might be quite a bit shorter. So I just marked it to my waist, set up a stop block at the rough mark, and then cut the 4 pieces for the solid leg just in one go. Much easier using a stop block to get the lengths consistent. I checked on the piece of ply which was cut by the supplier just to double check basically its size. Make a note on it on one of the bits of scrap, and then just cut those 4, 2 for the lower part, 2 for the top part. Again, all done on a stop block. So draw my pencil more than once, then cut the aprons to length. The long side of the bench. I like to keep things organised so I don't cut the wrong piece. Go back to the legs and mark out just where the thickness of the timber is for the top aprons, and then cut the corresponding parts for the legs to be laminated on later. I wasn't quite sure what height to put the bottom shelf at, because again, not knowing what height the bench is going to end up, so I spent a little bit of time working out roughly where things were going to go and lengths, and then just using that piece of scrap. I thought at one point I could use the existing offcuts because the bench, chances are it's going to be cut down and squared off at a later date, and it was only a rough height to start with anyway, so that looked pretty good. Bench dog thought it was Christmas. She likes to come along and sniff along all the sawdust and basically pick out any chips that she can squirrel away and chew up. So we'll keep those for later. We'll need those on the day. Make sure I've got the 4 bits of the right size, and then just organise things so I know I've got all the parts in the right place and I don't end up cutting a piece that it's already been cut by mistake. Drove in some screws for the laminated parts, just part way. Then I can pop a nice thick bead of glue on the edge and then fix them down. I've clipped a batten onto the bench there, and then used another piece of timber just to make sure that I got the right distance from the top of the bench for where the top aprons and stretchers are going to be. And then it was just a case of moving along the 4 legs and gluing the screw in the top section. I think I put 2 screws at the top, 2 at the bottom for those, and then just zigzag down the line. Once they were all done, just to do the bottom pieces, and then again using a scrap bit of timber as a guide, gluing the screw in the bottom pieces of the legs. Just saves buying a much thicker piece of timber, a much inflated price, and obviously having to then cut the notches out on 3 sides. Quick test fit to make sure everything goes in. I wanted it tight but not really tight because it's going to be taken apart and put together over the course of the exhibition. Then it was time to just notch out for whether the other side of the legs. So I set the depth stop on the chop saw, made a test cut, and then proceeded just to carve out the waist. The important parts are the cheek lines, making sure that they're the right place. But the bits in the middle where you're just carving out the timber, it's not really that important. The more cuts you do, the more sawdust you make, but the easier it is just to chip out the bits at the end. But to be honest, it's only a case of just grabbing a chisel, giving it a tap on the side, and then chucking them away. I find it much easier to do it this way than try and use the saw to do the whole lot. Although you've got to clean it up with the chisel, you make a lot less mess with sawdust. So dry fitted it all together, held it with a clamp, and then just marked out and cut the notches for the legs. The design that I used here basically uses this bottom piece of shelf to push the legs in tight against the band clamp, giving it a bit more strength. So I had a quick check, make sure everything was happy, and then I could basically proceed and put the top sections on. Because they're only held on basically in the recesses, I decided just to use a couple of clamps while I was making the top piece effectively, just to stop them from falling on the floor. Once they were all clamped on in rough place, then I could chuck a band clamp around the top, line everything up, make sure it was relatively secure, all nice and square, and then grab the piece of ply and fit it on the top. Normally you'd screw this straight to the top of the bench, no problem, then trim it up later, but because this has got to be removed and put back several times, I decided just to use some of the bits of offcut, clamp it on, and then screw it on. These effectively just grip around the stretchers and aprons and make sure that the top doesn't slide around. I actually trimmed it up afterwards with a piece of 2x1 mitered at the corners, and that obviously stops the top sliding around anymore. Trims it up nicely, and then saves all the bits falling off.